Iran does not need a revolution. It needs evolution. What do I mean by evolution? And if so, what does that evolution look like? Hi, my name is Arjang Jame. I am an evolutionary fitness coach. And although this video is about an alternative vision to Iran's problems, this is a story that has been repeated throughout history. And while Iran has a unique place in the Middle East, the breakdowns and solutions I'm going to provide in this video can be applied to any country around the world. Remember, my channel is called World Beyond Capitalism, which means what works for one must universally work for all. In this video, I'm going to talk about Iran's history, its past and present geopolitics, and if you're adaptive enough in your thought process to make it to the end of the video, I'm gonna show you how this collective evolution instead of disorganized revolution is gonna play out. So during the early to mid 20th century, the Middle East experienced heavy levels of colonialism and imperialism by the European powers. Resource acquisition and military occupation were a common theme. And Iran's resistance to European colonization was unique in that it had developed a constitutional revolution as a means to self-determination. But still, Iran did become occupied territory by the great European powers during World War I, which led to instability and economic disruption as the state weakened and foreign influence led to food insecurity, drought, and famine that caused millions of deaths by starvation and disease. Now, Iran does have a lot of oil. So, we're going to fast forward to 1951, where Iran had democratic elections leading to the rise of Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh, who became Iran's prime minister, focused on a few key policies. One was nationalization of the oil industry and economic sovereignty. He resisted the dominance of Iran's oil by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which later was called BP, short for British Petroleum. This meant that Iran's oil would be nationalized to benefit all Iranian people, to fund social programs and modernize the infrastructure while challenging Western economic power. Mossadegh was kind of a badass to me, and the idea of resource sovereignty was key to his agenda. He had a law degree from Tehran University and challenged the British at the United Nations, and he also had a confrontation with the monarch of the time, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Now, the US and England clearly did not like this, which led to the CIA and MI6-led coup d'etat of 1954 called Operation Ajax that got rid of Mossadegh and brought back the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi Jr. Now, the Shah of Iran brought forth hyper-modernization. And even though some good can be attributed to that, there's also a lot of bad. So I'm going to explain. First of all, he developed a lot of state infrastructure projects, developed the infrastructure of Iran. Some of the best universities and colleges in Iran right now were developed during his time. But he also brought forth heavy political repression. He cracked down on labor unions. Political dissent was pretty much a non-existence, as his brutal secret police called the Savak committed some of the worst human rights violations in the world at that time. Amnesty International documented all this. And his policies, although they were good for the country, some of them were good, he brought massive wealth inequality, as his policies really helped the wealthy, and the poor and those who lived in the rural areas, the farmers, were largely left to be marginalized. And this massive inequality and this marginalization of the poor led eventually to the 1979 revolution, which was a very bloody revolution, which was really led by the working classes, the communists, the socialist forces in the country. They sacrificed a lot to get rid of the Shah. So the Shah eventually fled, but the problem is that revolution was usurped and it was taken over pretty much by the Islamic Republic of Iran, what we have today. So since then, up until now, we've had the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has been, you can argue that it's worse, even worse than the Shah, because the Islamic Republic, even though it helped the poor a lot and it had a lot of projects and development to increase literacy rates among the poor, among other things, it also had heavy repression of women's rights. It forced the country to go on the Islamic law, hence the Islamic Republic. So a secular, diverse culture like Iran was forced to adopt Islamic rule. And, that brought a lot of repression and oppression in its own way. And yeah, the Islamic Republic is no good. It's corrupt. It's a brutal regime. And they have pretty much slowly over time stolen the wealth of the nation and sold it between their own corrupt buddies. It's a very corrupt regime. And it's no good. It has to go. And right now we see the results of that, right? We see the huge protests in Iran taking place. But I would have to add that the protests are also a result of the fact that the economy of Iran has pretty much like just collapsed, because the one thing that Islamic Republic did was it pretty much resisted Western hegemony. It was very much against the United States and Israel, and it supported poor people's liberation campaigns. It stood for Palestinian self-determination. It fought for the freedom of South Africans as they fought to get rid of African apartheid. So, you know, the Islamic Republic, even though it had a lot of negatives, it did also fight for liberation of poor and ostracized peoples. But overall, it's a repressive, violent regime, and we see the results of it today. I've actually lost people in my family due to the regime's brutal practices. And so the combination of the fact that it is a dictatorial, brutal regime that actually killed a lot of the communists, it jailed a lot of the socialists, murdered them, it killed a lot of the opposition forces. That is why right now when we see the revolution happening, there's really no alternative leaders. There's no alternative movements to present the future for Iran. I mean, because most of those leaders were either jailed or executed. So yeah, it's a very tough place for the Iranian people to be in, because they're literally stuck between the United States and Israel and the West, which are trying to overthrow Iran and take its resources. And on the other side, they're stuck to have to deal with a brutal, repressive regime that really is corrupt. I mean, it has massive levels of corruption, one of the most corrupt regimes in history, and it's been stealing the resources of the country, vast amounts of oil, and, you know, the Iranian people have not really benefited too much from that. Potentially thousands of people have been killed, thousands have been thrown in jail. But I'm not gonna lie, this revolution, this massive protest movement is also spurred by the brutal sanctions of the United States, and also the fact that the Israeli Mossad and the United States CIA are admittedly on the ground working to spur things up in Iran. And a lot of the violence committed against the government workers and the state of security forces has been committed by Mossad-backed forces. So yeah, it's a very difficult situation. And, you know, I personally want to see Iran transform itself internally without any help from the West, because, I mean, anybody who paid attention to history knows what the US has been up to. Look at what the United States did to Iraq. Look what it did to Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Libya. Any country that tried to do something different were overthrown and destroyed, pretty much. Afghanistan. You look what happened to Afghanistan. I mean, you want to think about hopelessness and uselessness? We spent trillions of dollars and decades fighting in Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban and hand the country right back to the Taliban. And when you look at Israel, when you look at what they've done, Israel, what they did to Gaza, destroyed Gaza, pulverized Gaza, committed a genocide, the most well-televised genocide in history. You think Israel really wants anything good for Iran? No. Israel wants to eliminate all opposition to its oppression of the Middle East, and as it has really achieved that with Lebanon, with Syria, and with a lot of the resistance forces in the area, you know, also with Yemen. They want Iran to become a failed state, to balkanize it, chop it up, divide it up, so that way they can go in there, bomb Iran whenever they want, and disallow Iran from being able to put up any resistance to Israeli hegemony, as they did with Iraq as well. So I do not trust Israel. You should not trust Israel. You should not trust the Shah's son hanging out in California, wherever the hell he's at, in his privileged life. He's an Israeli puppet. So we should not want any help from the West, okay? No help from the West. Hands off from the West. Iran needs an internal revolution, and I would argue an internal evolution, as I'm going to talk about right here. So, you know, if we forget about our past history, we're doomed to repeat it. And insanity, what is insanity? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and again and expecting a different outcome. So here's the part where I'm going to go into, which is something fresh that I'm trying to present to you, something that's going to be different than the failed attempts at the past to transform Iran for a better future for all Iranians and for the Middle East. All right, here's the part of the video where I'm going to get to evolutionary solutions. Look, guys, we cannot be ignorant enough and insane enough to think that old solutions, you know, 20th century solutions can actually be applied to that 21st century world. We don't need another monarchy. We don't need another regime. We don't even need another leader. We need a movement where everyone is their own leader. Everyone needs to be an educated, self-sufficient, visionary, and an evolutionary for the future of humanity. Like, hasn't the past promises, the past solutions failed miserably? So it's time to take a new perspective when it comes to not only improving the condition in Iran, but our entire planetary ecosphere. Yeah, because really, we need a redesign of our culture, a redesign of our economic system, and our socio-political organization. So my background as a systems thinker and an evolutionary thinker pretty much brings me to the point where I realized that resource sovereignty is the key. And we have to think in terms of redesigning Iran's infrastructure and the way that it can sustain resource, efficiency to meet the needs of the population in a sustainable manner. Because right now, when we look at it, every country is pretty much held hostage to global markets. The market system, which is highly inefficient, our dependence on fossil fuels, and the fact that Iran's major currency seems to be fossil fuels, selling oil and trying to make profits. These are very decadent and inefficient and corroded ways of thinking that will never ever improve Iran's condition. Even if a new leader comes in place, it's not going to make things better. So we need a radical shift, a departure from our old way of thinking. Instead of focusing on GDP and job creation, we have to think about environmental sustainability and public health. Instead of thinking about, how to make Iran more competitive with other countries in the global market, no, we should think about how people can cooperate with each other within Iran's and the world at large. I mean, we have to create a cooperative network, mutual aid networks where people's needs are met through exchanging ideas and helping one another. And, we have to really transition from this idea that we're hyper focused and hyper obsessed with fixing the issues of one race or one political group, and try to focus on something that can work for everybody, And universally, human needs are human needs. Doesn't matter what kind of person you are, human needs are universal. And so the idea of resource sovereignty is very important to me when it comes to Iran, because think about it. The Islamic Republic, they've made it clear that when it comes to fighting against Western hegemony, they have about 20 provinces that they said that if Iran goes to war with the United States or Israel, those provinces can actually become resource nodes of their own, where they can operate independently of a centralized state infrastructure. So that means that each province can fight against US hegemony on its own for about a year without needing any assistance from the other areas of the government. So that's pretty incredible, right? But how about we transition that from this idea of militaristic combat perspective to the idea of resource sovereignty, whereas each node, it becomes its own self-sufficient and self-sustaining resource access-based abundance system where people can actually have their needs met in a localized setting. And that can definitely be done. I mean, when you think about 21st century technology and our scientific understandings, I mean, really, if we apply intelligent design application, every region of Iran should be able to meet the people's needs through intelligent systems of agriculture, sustainable architecture, sustainable water maintenance systems. I mean, really, if you think about it, Iran is at a crisis right now where it's losing water, right? I mean, at the end, doesn't matter how much political governance you have, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how much oil you have. If you run out of water, you're pretty much screwed. And Iran's been having this issue for a long time. I mean, Iran's been just irresponsibly wasting water. The Islamic Republic has been wasting water rampantly, and Tehran is facing a serious water crisis in the coming months, if not the coming weeks, So, yeah, so we really have to think about evolutionary systems, really thinking about evolution, right? We have to realize what's happening under the political struggle. Tehran has a severe water crisis. Lake Urmia is disappearing. Aquifers are draining. Snowmelt is decreasing. And while they, fight over who controls oil revenue, the country is literally running out of water. Food security is collapsing. They're importing wheat while exporting luxury pistachios, which is just so stupid. 85 million people concentrated in cities that can't sustain themselves. This is not a political crisis wearing an ecological mask. It's an ecological crisis wearing a political mask. Truth is that 20th century tools cannot solve 21st century problems. A centralized state is trying to manage water like a commodity. And sanctions are forcing isolation, but leadership is still thinking in extraction and export terms. Revolutionary energy keeps targeting symptoms such as regime change or ideology instead of a proper structure, such as how we organize in relation to living systems. They're trying to solve biological problems with political solutions. That's why revolution keeps failing. They're optimizing the wrong variables. So, what does revolution actually look like? We need to look at the past and present to be able to design the future. Iran actually had ancient Qanat systems, and Persians had solved this problem 3,000 years ago. Traditional architecture was designed for water scarcity and microclimate creation. And, those people literally had dome-shaped, earth-based structural designs. They had air-cooled cities and primitive underground water transportation systems. Those weren't decorative. They were actually adaptive technology. And just imagine what we can do right now with our modern technology. We can have a regenerative plan to make Iran look like something completely different than the status quo. Okay, so finally, here's my call to action for you and all of us. The mindset shift. Evolution is not about finding the perfect system. No, it's about staying flexible and adaptive to our environment. We must adapt to the changing world. And it's about taking action right now and embodying the change we all want to see. So I want you to stop waiting for the perfect leader, the perfect revolution, or the perfect moment. Live as if the revolution has already happened. Become the society you want to live in your own life. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our speed or our power. It's adaptability. We are not as fast as the cheetah. We're not as strong as the gorilla. But our strength comes in our ability to really adapt and be malleable and change our thought process with the changing times. So we survive because we could change, adjust, learn, and evolve. That's our superpower, believe it or not. But we've forgotten it. We've gotten stuck in old patterns, in old institutions, in old ways of living that have no longer serve us anymore. Stagnation is the ultimate enemy. The enemy is not the US or Israel or the oppressive regime in Iran. No. It's old systems that are holding us back from evolving. Remember, anything that does not move dies. Stagnation equals extinction. We're watching half the species on Earth go extinct. Our critical thinking is going extinct. Our ability to adapt is going extinct. Any person, any institution, any system that makes adaptability a non-issue, that resists change, self-reflection, self-correction, that needs to be scrutinized and it needs to be evolved out of, okay? So this means we have to self-reflect and self-correct constantly. Evolve out of the old pattern in yourself. Train new habits together, but not in isolation. From relationships that are truly meaningful and adaptive, and building communities that evolve as an integrated whole. Now, I'm not coming at you with a finished system in a few years. No, I'm inviting you to co-create with me right now. Join this tribe of evolutionary thinkers, people committed to spiritual, physical, and emotional wellness. Evolutionary thinking in every sense, personal and structural, integrating our pieces together. Now, none of us have it all figured out, but many of us have pieces. When we bring those pieces together, we create something greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what makes it a truly evolutionary fitness system. We're actively in this process together. The revolution isn't coming, guys. It's happening right now in how we choose to organize, coordinate, and adapt. So, in conclusion, the question isn't whether the world will change, it's whether you'll evolve with it. All right. So, in summary, the people of Iran desperately need not new leaders, they need a new system, they need a new way of thinking, and we have to claim resource sovereignty, make Iran sustainable, in a sense that it can, efficiently meet the people's needs in a local setting, and all the things that I've talked about on my channel for years. I've been part of the Zeitgeist movement. I'm a systems thinker. I advocate for an entirely new global socioeconomic system called the resource-based economy. It doesn't matter what it's called, but the point is that we have to literally radically evolve and transition from all the old ways of thinking to a new evolutionary adaptive process that can meet the needs of everybody. Because really, the solutions that can be applied to Iran, the evolutionary systems, the dynamics that can be applied to the future of Iran's sovereignty are really solutions that can be adapted to the entire world. And with that said, I really thank you guys for watching the video. Please, if you liked it, share it with others. I really hope the situation gets better there. And to me, honestly, Iran is not a place, it's not a country. To me, Iran is a culture, it's a people, it's a way of thinking. And no matter what happens to the future of Iran, I'm really just a citizen of this earth, and I'm committed to making life better for everybody, everywhere. I hope you guys join me in my mission, and I hope to see you soon. Peace out, much love.